Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into a case that really shook a seemingly peaceful community. We're headed to Longmont, Colorado.
Well,
Picture, like a charming mountain town where everyone knows their neighbors, feels safe.
yeah, exactly. Longmont really has that kind of idyllic small town vibe, which I think is part of what makes this story so unsettling.
Right, it's that whole this could never happen here feeling. But in 2018 it did. On St. Patrick's Day, a single mother of three, Rita Gutierrez Garcia, vanished, just
Yeah.
gone. And we're going to try to piece together what happened using this really incredible true crime podcast episode we found. It goes deep into the investigation, and we even hear directly from the lead detective.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Detective Cody Clark, he really leads the charge on bringing Rita home. And you get to hear firsthand how dedicated he was, and also just learn about Rita, who she was, a mother, business owner, really loved by everyone.
So St. Patrick's Day, night for celebration, Rita goes out with some friends. Everything seems normal.
Right.
But then she turns down a ride home.
Yep.
Last anyone sees her, she's on her phone in the bar parking lot. Then, nothing.
Poof.
Vanished.
Mm.
And that's when that question hits, right? Did she just, take off, need some time? Or is it something way worse? That hangs over the whole investigation.
Like a dark cloud. So naturally, police start with those closest to Rita, and two guys right off the bat raise some red flags.
Yep.
Her recent ex, David, and her ex-husband.
Right. Both had some history with Rita that made them, at least initially, people the police had to look at.
Sure.
David, for example, had a big fight with Rita, like the very day she disappeared.
No kidding.
Yeah, and there's even this email. He's begging her to get back together. She says, no way.
Wow.
And then when police question him, he's not exactly helpful. Gets defensive, angry.
So that's suspicious, for sure.
Makes you think, could a fight have turned into something much, much worse?
Huh?
But as it turns out, David has a solid alibi. He was at home with his mom that night.
Okay, so not the scorned ex-lover then.
Nope.
But then there's the ex-husband, and this is where things get, honestly, pretty scary. Yeah, the podcast really lays out how dangerous this guy was. He had a history of violence towards Rita. One time, actually held her down, covered her mouth and nose so she couldn't breathe.
That's terrible.
She actually had to text her mom to call 911. That's how bad it was.
Scary.
So the police had to consider if he was involved, even though, well, he'd been deported to Mexico before Rita disappeared.
Another layer to this whole thing. Could he have planned something from afar?
It's a possibility they had to look into, but they were thorough. They confirm he never came back into the U.S. after the deportation.
So another dead end.
It seems like it. But this is where the investigation takes a turn you wouldn't expect. Remember how Rita turned down that ride home?
Yeah.
Turns out she was talking to someone in that parking lot, a man named Juan Figueroa.
Okay.
And this guy wasn't just some dude trying to chat up women at a bar. He was already wanted by the police.
Oh no. What for?
A brutal sexual assault a few months before Rita disappeared. And we're not talking like a minor thing. This assault was, the detective describes it as one of the most horrific things he'd seen.
That's chilling.
So then Rita's cousins, they see a photo, they say, yeah, that's the guy she was talking to. And then the cell data puts them in the same spot just before 3 a.m.
Okay, so now we're getting somewhere.
Right. It's all starting to add up. And then there's this 911 call from Rita's phone. At 3:07 a.m.,
What happened?
it disconnects, like right away. It's that classic sign that something bad, something really bad has happened.
And things escalate.
Absolutely. Now it's not just a missing person, it's a possible crime scene.
Right.
And Detective Cody, he's on it. Reviews security tapes, analyzes phone data, even walks the route Rita might have taken. He's determined. And that pays off. They're looking through hours of footage and they see it. A white pickup truck, broken marker light, stops right where Rita's phone went silent.
Hold on. A white truck, broken marker light. That sounds familiar.
It should. Know who drives that truck? Juan Figueroa.
Oh.
And there's a witness who puts him at the bar that night, too.
So they have their suspect, possible crime scene, even the vehicle. It's all coming together. But Figueroa is gone.
Poof. Vanished. Off the grid. Bouncing between jobs. Crashing on couches.
A real ghost.
Yes, super frustrating for the investigation. But Cody's not giving up.
I can imagine. So how does he catch a break? This Figueroa seems pretty good at disappearing.
Well, sometimes even criminals make enemies, and Figueroa had one that becomes, shall we say, an unlikely ally.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. An unlikely ally. What do you mean?
Well, Figueroa used to work for this guy, right? And this boss, he was convinced Figueroa had ripped him off, like stole from him. So this boss, he's holding a grudge, a big one. And when he hears Figueroa's on the run, well, he sees a chance to get back at him.
Hold on. You're saying a disgruntled ex-boss is going to help catch this guy? That's crazy. What did he do?
This boss, he knew Figueroa was hiding out in Mexico. So he cooks up this plan, right? He calls Figueroa, offers him a job, good pay, the whole deal. Even says he'll buy Figueroa's truck.
Oh, I see. So he's luring him back across the border with this too-good-to-be-true offer.
Exactly. Figueroa totally falls for it. Probably figures he can get a clean truck out of the deal, too, if things got messy down in Mexico.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the second Figueroa steps back into Texas, boom, arrested. That outstanding warrant for the assault, it's like right out of a movie.
Wow, that's wild. So Figueroa's locked up. Did they finally get him to talk about Rita?
Not so fast. This guy's slippery. At first, yeah, he agrees to talk, but the minute they mention Rita's name, he shuts down, lawyers up, the whole 9 yards, won't say a word.
Ugh, classic. So frustrating. But even with him behind bars, they still need to find Rita, right, and prove what happened. How do they crack this case?
Okay, so remember how I said criminals sometimes make enemies? Turns out Figueroa wasn't keeping quiet in jail. He was actually bragging.
Bragging? You mean about what he did?
Yep.
Couldn't help himself. He was telling anyone who'd listened about his crimes.
Oh, man, what a jerk. Did anyone believe him?
Believe him. They reported him. And it wasn't just one guy either.
No way. Multiple inmates came forward.
7 different inmates said Figueroa confessed to them, each with similar details.
Sev. Okay, that's got to be something, right? Even if it's coming from, jailhouse informants. But how do you use that in court? Juries aren't always quick to trust those kinds of testimonies.
Cody took a risk, a big one. He gets permission to wiretap Figueroa's cell phone inside the prison. Think about that.
Wow. That's got to be tough to pull off.
It was. But finding Rita, giving her family closure, it became as important as getting the conviction.
I can understand that.
So they set up the wiretap, and they wait. And then Figueroa starts talking.
No way. He confessed on the recording.
Not a full confession. But it's bad. The podcast plays some of these recordings. You hear Figueroa, he's talking about meeting Rita, things going wrong, and then how he had to bury her. It's bone-chilling, honestly. Whew, that must have been huge for the case. They've got him in custody, witnesses, now this, but they still don't have Rita.
Right. And without a body, it's hard to get a murder conviction. It's like they're so close, but still so far away. So they go to trial. But not for the murder. Not yet.
For what, then?
For the assault. Remember that biological evidence from his truck? The DNA with multiple profiles? Well, in those 4 years, technology had advanced.
Okay, so they were able to, separate those profiles?
Exactly. And one of them, a perfect match. Rita Gutierrez Garcia.
Whoa. That's it. The physical evidence they needed. What did Figueroa do when they got him on that?
Well, now he's facing kidnapping and murder charges. Things are getting real, and you'd think he'd crack under pressure, but instead he does something even more unexpected.
Okay, now you got to tell me. What did he do? Don't leave me hanging. What did he do?
Okay, so remember how Figueroa was so desperate to get back to the U.S. for that fake job offer? Turns out his time in Mexico, it wasn't just about needing a new truck.
What do you mean?
The podcast kind of hints at it, but it sounds like he might have gotten mixed up with some bad people. Maybe even a cartel.
Well, hold on. So he was running from more than just the assault charge. He was maybe in deep with a cartel.
It does kind of make that whole rush to get back with a clean vehicle make more sense, right?
Yeah, definitely. So back to the trial. They've got him on these serious charges, the DNA evidence. What happens?
Well, his lawyers, they start talking plea deals.
Really? He's going to try to cut a deal after all this.
He does. And it's a tough one. He says he'll plead guilty to murder, lead the investigators to Rita's remains. But in exchange, he wants a lighter sentence.
Man, that's rough. I mean, it's closure for the family, finally being able to, lay her to rest. But does it feel like justice when he's basically bargaining with information about her life?
Yeah, the podcast really wrestles with that. It's a hard question. You've got the family desperate to find Rita, bring her home, and then you've got this guy, a murderer, trying to get a better deal for himself.
So what happened? Did he lead them to Rita after all those years?
He did. Figueroa took them to this remote spot, somewhere he knew, and that's where they found her, a shallow grave just off a road. The podcast describes it. It's desolate, heartbreaking, just a terrible reminder of what happened.
I can't even imagine what Rita's family went through. all those years not knowing,
Mm-hmm.
and then finally having that confirmation.
It's amazing how strong they were to find some peace and finally being able to bring Rita home. But, and this is crazy, the story doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
Nope. Even after pleading guilty, getting sentenced, Figueroa, he tries to appeal the conviction.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
After everything.
Yeah, hard to believe, right? But it didn't work. He's serving 48 years for Rita's murder, and that's running at the same time as his 93 years for the assault.
Wow. So he's going to be behind bars for, well, forever. But does that feel like justice for Rita?
That's what the podcast leaves us with, that question. There's relief that Figueroa's locked up, he can't hurt anyone else. But there's also this sadness, this emptiness, knowing Rita's life was cut short and nothing can change that.
It's easy to focus on the investigation, the twists and turns, how awful Figueroa was.
Yeah.
But Rita, she was a mother, a daughter, a friend. Her community lost so much when she was taken.
Yeah. And the podcast does a great job of showing that. It's not just about the crime, it's about Rita, the person she was. We hear from her family, her friends, and you really feel that loss.
And the community in Longmont, they were incredible. They rallied around Rita's family, never gave up hope. That must have meant a lot.
It did. They held vigils, shared information, kept her memory alive. It's powerful to see a community like that coming together in the face of something so terrible.
It makes you think about how a crime like this, it affects everyone, not just the victim, but their whole world.
It's true. It's a really sobering thought. But there's also hope. Seeing how Lamont responded, it shows how strong we can be when we come together.
So to everyone listening, we've taken a deep dive today into Rita's story, the investigation, the horrors Figueroa committed, and the strength of a community. And we're left with a lot to think about.
Yeah. What does justice truly mean? How can we create safer spaces for everyone? This is a story that stays with you. And hopefully it gets us all thinking about how we can build a better, more just world.